Welcome to the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This podcast is dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Like all the best bookshops, this podcast is filled with all kinds of books and all kinds of authors. So tune in, browse around, find a new author, and discover a new favorite book at the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. I'm Stacey Horan, author, book lover, and host of the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This is episode number 235. For more information about this or any of our episodes, go to my website, staceyhoran.com. If you enjoy the podcast, leave us a review, like us on social media, and share us with your friends, family, and fellow readers. In today's episode of The Bookshop at the End of the Internet, I'm chatting with author Patsy C. Robertson about her debut novel, A Concoction of Lies. After reading hundreds of books, Patsy was frustrated by the lack of representation of older people as main characters. In A Concoction of Lies, Patsy's characters range from their 40s to their 70s, and she places them in a thrilling, high-stakes game of cat and mouse, something she also wasn't finding in the books she'd been reading. In this story, Chance Moore leaves his job as an FBI cybersecurity specialist and becomes a cybercriminal, hacking the bank account of a notorious Guatemalan cartel member. He is kidnapped, smuggled into Guatemala, and manages to escape to the Belize border. During his escape, he crosses paths with Bonnie Hollister, a plantation owner who battles addiction and has recently been taken advantage of by a charming conman. When Chance and Bonnie cross paths, their struggles and their pasts catch up with them and further endanger them both. In this episode, I'll chat with Patsy about her writing journey, what led her to fall in love with writing, and how her 50-year career in computers gave her plenty of ideas for this book, as well as a few other things coming up. Patsy Robertson, I want to thank you very much for joining me today on the podcast.
Thank you, Stacey. It is an honor to be here.
I thought what we could do today is start by talking about your new book, A Concoction of Lies. If you don't mind, tell us a little bit about this book and what inspired you to write it.
Well, A Concoction of Lies is my first book. I'm a new author. I'm an indie author. And what inspired me was the lack of books that I was reading, and I've read hundreds and hundreds of books that don't feature older characters. It seems as though, like a lot of the media, at age 40, everything stops, or maybe at 50, everything stops, and people over that age become invisible. So whenever I decided to write the book, that I was going to feature older, more mature characters. And that was my inspiration. And in Concoction of Lies, I think the youngest character is probably 40, and the oldest one is in his 70s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I decided that if I'm going to write about older people, it had to be exciting. So I decided to make it a thriller. And it kind of started from there. The book it focuses on two primary lost souls. Chance Moore is a FBI cybersecurity specialist who leaves his legitimate job at the FBI and begins hacking bank accounts. He hacks the bank account of a notorious Guatemalan cartel and steals their money. The cartel kidnaps him and has him smuggled into Guatemala. Then they give him two options: either hack for the cartel or suffer a lot of torture and a horrible death. But Chance manages to escape. And in the process of escaping, with the cartel hot on his heels, they shoot him and he is mortally wounded. The second protagonist is Bonnie Hollister. Bonnie is an older, lonely woman. She's lived a privileged life in the US and Belize. And she is currently in Belize to sell her family's 150-year-old banana plantation. But she's suffering from chronic depression and she's addicted to alcohol and prescription drugs. And she becomes involved with this unscrupulous businessman who puts her life and the plantation in danger. Chance and Bonnie's paths cross when Chance is found unconscious and close to death on Bonnie's plantation and is moved into her house to recover. As Bonnie struggles to solve her problems, Chance is anxious to leave the plantation before the cartel finds out where he is. But a squad of cartel soldiers using covert intelligence know exactly where he is, and they're coming after him. So I'll leave it right there because I
Oh,
want to leave some.
right. We
Yeah,
can't give spoilers, but
yeah.
talk about a cliffhanger. Okay, let's dive a little deeper. I am curious about our two main characters, Chance and Bonnie. Different authors come to character creation differently. Some of them hear the voices in their heads and then they concoct a character around whatever these characters are speaking. Some see them as images and then they create the backstory for the characters and figure out what the characters are doing. How did Chance and Bonnie come to you? What naturally came to you? What did you develop? Did they change over the course of you sort of writing and planning the book? I'm curious. Can you give us a little insight into the creation of these two main characters?
Well, computer technology is has been my career, like 50 years worth. It's all I've ever done. So I knew going in that this was going to have a technology component. I wanted it to be a technology crime, so to speak. And I wanted to make my male protagonist, I wanted him to be a really compelling person. So Chance, I felt as though needed to have a job, whereas he could have the ability to hack bank accounts. So he's 55. He's at the end of, say, the almost ready to retire when, he has this life altering event. So I wanted to make a great all around good guy have something happen that would make him turn bad or commit a crime. So in my creative writing classes, it was like that emotional wound, what would bring him down so low. And that's how I kind of worked with him.
Mm,
Again, I don't want to spoil too much, but he gets has a devastating event, and it's hacking bank accounts is his way of getting the money he needs, thinking it's going to solve his problems. With Bonnie, um, she's lived a very privileged life, and she's 60, but she too has this life altering event that really brings her down. Whereas the depression, I wanted to talk more about depression and how it impacts older adults. And that kind of sent me down that path. The depression, what she had to do about that, and the rest of her addiction with the prescription drugs and the alcohol were all a part of how she was handling this depression. So that's how I kind of built those backgrounds for them. But then to bring them to countries outside of the US, I wanted to do that simply because I wanted a different environment. I didn't want it to take place in the US. And Guatemala and Belize are next door neighbors.
mm.
So that was the reasoning for that.
And have you been to Guatemala or Belize? Was this
Oh,
something you knew?
yes.
Oh, okay. So
Yes.
so you had some
Yes.
familiarity. You weren't researching from scratch.
No, 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 no.
Okay. Because I
Yeah,
was going to
yeah.
ask you how much research you had to do for this. So obviously computers you knew.
Hmm.
Maybe I'm going to assume maybe hacking was not necessarily part of your 50-year career.
No, but had to deal with a lot of them. Had to deal with a lot of them. Yeah,
So and then travel. I assume travel was is a big thing for you.
very
And
big.
okay.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
So in the balance, you knew a lot going into this book and built around your own knowledge for the story. How much research did you end up having to do though? I mean, it's a novel, you get to make it up, but how much research did you find yourself doing?
Oh, a lot, a
Mm,
lot. Not only with the physical environments, the countries themselves. Like I said, I have traveled. I have been to Guatemala and Belize several times, and they're both breathtakingly beautiful countries. So I kind of have to apologize sometimes for how you make it appear, because there's a crime going on. But I love both countries. I love both countries. And just for Belize, I had to look up a lot of uh, the impact of migration from their neighbors. Belize is probably one of the most stable and well, it's the only English speaking country in Central America. But they are impacted by a lot of the migration from their surrounding neighbors that come up through on their way through Mexico, on their way to the United States. So I touch on that in the book as how it impacts them. Also, the research into the addiction and depression among older adults. That was an eye opener simply because of all of the publicity that's been in the news about opioid addiction, et cetera. But they seem to focus more on younger people and not on senior citizens or baby boomers. And from my research, it shows that baby boomers are significantly impacted by the addiction to not only opioids, but also to benzos, the antidepressant medication. So that was Bonnie. I wanted to use that for her. Also, Bonnie has a banana plantation that she's trying to sell that belongs to her family. And there is a fungus in the book. It's called Panama disease that is destroying the Cavendish banana, which is that common banana that we all eat every day. And it has spread like worldwide. So it is a big issue. And for years, they've been saying that Cavendish banana is going to be extinct because there's no cure for this fungus. And so I had to research that. So it was just a lot of different research that I had to do that wasn't, say, from my personal experience.
mm. Well,
Mhm.
let's talk about the setting because I imagine if you take these characters and you put them in a place like Belize or set them down in the middle of a Guatemalan cartel, it adds
Mhm.
tension to the story. But what was
Mhm.
it about these locations that you felt you needed to capture in the book to really let the reader experience these locales for themselves? What was important to you about them?
Uh, a because they were neighbors and they're kind of separated by this enormous rainforest or jungle. Guatemala has a lot of modern spaces, so to speak, but a lot of the country is very poor and underdeveloped, and it has made it really easy for cartels and these negative, groups to blossom. So that's why I kind of focused on Guatemala. And with Belize, it's kind of the opposite. It's a English speaking country. It was settled by the British. It's a lot more sophisticated, even though they also have a lot of rural, undeveloped areas. And it's a haven for retirees, US retirees, European retirees. So it's a lot more developed and progressive.
I'm curious because you said you've read a lot of books, and this is your
Yeah.
debut novel. How did you approach it? Are you of the school where you create a detailed outline or you plot everything out first, or was this something where you just sat down and you started pantsing the story to see where it would lead? How did you approach it?
Very methodically.
Oh, okay.
I was taking during COVID, like a lot of other people, and like a million other retired senior citizens, I retired, and I was bored, just bored, and started looking for a new hobby. Found a creative writing class at the local community college online, and fell in love. So one of the things that we were taught was to do the outline. So I started with a broad outline, then kind of kept refining it. So otherwise, I would go down a rabbit hole and get lost. So I had to have a method or process to follow in order to, you know, not spend all of my time rewriting things.
So, what comes first for you then with with the stories? Is it character first and then sort of plot and setting and all those other details? Or is it the plot first, the idea for the story, and then you fill it in with whatever characters you need and place it wherever you need to? What comes first for you?
I think the characters,
Mm,
I I chose two, which at first I thought it would be a stretch, but I just didn't want to deal with one character. So the characters came first. And then I automatically knew the countries that I wanted to use. And based on the outline, it was kind of building from there. I built their backgrounds in the US, how they, grew up, got to the point where they started with, you know, moving on through these countries. Because the book kind of transitions from the US, chances smuggled all the way through Mexico into Guatemala. So, yeah, I kind of had to start with the characters and then the countries and move from there.
okay. What comes easiest for you? Because you've written the book now, so and you've taken your class and you've worked with this outline for a long time. So I'm curious, what comes easiest for you? Is it creating that plot? Is it writing dialogue? Is it crafting the characters? And whatever is easiest, is it what you thought would be easiest when you set out to write the book, or was it a surprise?
Um, I think dialogue is the hardest part for
Hmm.
me. Dialogue and making it realistic dialogue, because
Mm-hmm.
that was some of the feedback that I received from my editors. It's like, this doesn't really sound real, so I think dialogue is the hardest. I think setting up the scenes
Mm,
and was probably the easiest part because I can visualize that. I can
okay.
visualize that much better, yeah, than actual
Than
dialogue.
hearing the dialogue, hearing the characters.
Exactly. Hmm.
Interesting. Was that surprising for you that dialogue was so tricky?
Yes, it
Hmm.
was. It really was. Simply because I'm dealing with characters that live in different countries different, that speak different languages. So the Mexican Guatemalan faction, they have a Hispanic accent, whereas the Belizean faction has a Caribbean accent. So I was worrying. That was like, how am I going to express this? I didn't want to try to write dialogue using, I guess, terms and phrases that weren't, say, normal or what a character would say that lived in Guatemala. And the editor has really helped me through that process. So I'm using English, but I had to reference it within the book to say, in Spanish, he said this, or
Mm-hmm.
something like that.
Right.
So give the reader a frame of reference as to how the character was speaking. Because in the book, Chance can speak Spanish, and but he doesn't let on that he can speak Spanish. He listens. So as the Spanish characters are talking, he's listening, and then I have to interpret what they say.
Mm,
So yeah, that was kind of tricky. I'll
right.
remember that one going forward.
Note to self for future books.
Definitely.
Well, what has been the reaction from your readers regarding this book? Because I'm curious what they thought of reading a book featuring, as you mentioned, mature characters in
Mhm.
this incredibly tense, action-packed situation. So, what kind of feedback did you get from readers?
It's been amazing because I really initially felt I was going to write a book that would not sell because the characters are so much older.
Mm,
But that doesn't appear to have been the case. As a matter of fact, a couple of weeks ago, I was having a massage and my therapist let me know. He says, I'm reading your book. He says, and I'm so happy that they aren't in their 20s and things. And I was like, really? I was so touched. But yes, it's gotten a really good response. The sales, I'm just totally humbled by the sales thus far. So, obviously there is a space out there for older, mature characters that aren't in their 30s or
right,
40s
right,
that still have, something to contribute.
right,
So
right.
yes, I'm very happy.
Good. Do you have anything currently in progress? Anything you're working on now? Do you have more books planned?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good.
Yes. Second book is in progress and it will also have a cybersecurity component, of course, but that's all I know.
Mm,
And it will also have two protagonists, a male and a female,
okay.
but totally different situation. And it is going to take place in Trinidad and Tobago. Yeah.
So more accents, more
Yeah.
dialogue.
Yeah, but they're Caribbean accents and they speak
Okay.
English.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Interesting. So have you always wanted to write? Because you mentioned you took the creative writing course after you had retired. But was writing something you always wanted to do, or was this sort of a found hobby just a few years ago?
Just a found hobby a few years ago.
Really?
It never, I've always been an avid reader from the time I could pick up a book, but never occurred to me to be an author, never.
Really?
And I think somewhere in after that third or fourth creative writing class, I was hooked. I was just hooked. It's such an amazing world that I did not know existed. Not just the writing part, but the whole publishing industry and how someone can get something out of their brain into the hands of someone. It's just been a fascinating journey for me. It has been, and I'm there. I'm just hooked. I'm hooked.
What has been the most surprising part of this journey? Something that you now realize that you had no idea about when you started.
Editors.
Mm,
I really didn't have a clue as to what the real editors did or the different types of editors. So that was really an eye-opening process. And I thank God for them every day. It's just, I was just, oh my goodness. They made it so, I mean, they took my little manuscript, ripped it apart, of course, turned it upside down,
mm,
and said, you need to think about this a little more, or you need to expand this. You need to cut this back. This is too wordy. And I just kept following their little, directions and everything. And when I look back, when they finally put the book in my hand and I sat down immediately and started reading it, I was like, this is my book. I couldn't
mm.
believe it.
Are
Yeah,
you
yeah.
ever surprised when you read back something that you've written? Has it ever hit you like, "Ah, I don't remember. That's actually good. I don't remember writing that. Like, have you ever been surprised by your own words?
No, because I have reread this thing 150 times. During the process of the writing and the editing and everything. So immediately, when I find out that something's not right or whatever, it's almost like remembering the chapter and verse of the Bible. I can go right there and point it out.
So, how different is writing the second book from writing the first one?
I'm so much more careful because of the lessons learned.
Mm.
The lessons learned. I just have to make sure. I think I'm probably more, I don't say cautious with this one than I was with the first one. The first one, I didn't know what I was doing, you know?
Hmm.
So this one is like, oh no, you forgot to do this. You have to circle back. You know, they've got to see it, they've got to taste it, they've got to smell it.
Right,
So I
right.
have to go back and, rewrite it. So that's the difference. At least now I have something to fall back on,
Yeah,
those lessons learned.
yeah. The experience is very different, isn't it? In some ways, you're sort of older and wiser as far as being a writer, right? So you know more, and the writing is, I think,
Mhm.
becomes richer. At the same time, there's a lot more restrictions, a lot more that you're carrying with you through
Exactly.
that manuscript. So
I
it's
agree.
it's almost harder, I think, to
I
write. The more you
agree. I
write, the
agree.
almost the harder it becomes because you're trying to remember all these lessons you were supposed to have fully integrated book to book to book.
I agree. I totally agree. It is. It is. And the classes haven't stopped. I found so many resources online to take classes to help with better character development, to help with better scene development. And it just goes on and on. And I'm just so happy to have all of these resources out there that can actually help. So, yeah, the second book is proven to be a lot more intense than the
Mm.
first one.
So you're writing the second one. Do you have that desire to sort of dabble in different genres or different formats, novel or nonfiction or novellas or poetry? Or do you have that desire to try all kinds of different things? Or are you focused on trying to find your voice, that story that you're just really good at telling?
I think I'm trying to find my voice
Hmm.
because, prior to this book, I didn't have one. So, yeah, trying to find my voice. I literally thought about it. Like you said, try a different genre. And I was like, I'm just a baby. I'm not mature enough to kind of venture off into science fiction or fantasy or something of that nature. Just kind of get this one down first, and then maybe, later we can move on to something else. I initially thought about romance, and I was like, nah, got a lot of romance writers out there already. Just add some nuggets of romance in the what you're doing now and just let it go. But hone your skill at this one, the thrillers, and maybe later, maybe later.
Sure. Well, there's a lot of romance out there. Probably not a lot of mature characters escaping a drug cartel by running through a jungle. So, yes, there's probably more of a market for that, I'm guessing.
Yeah, maybe so.
Good. Okay. Well, if people want to learn more about you and the books and look for the new release when it's ready, where can they go to find you and that information?
PatsyRobertson.com, one word. That's my website. And I have an author's page on Facebook, Patsy C. Robertson Author. And then I have an Instagram account. And I'm building, I'm working on the Instagram stuff. It's like a new world out there and it flashes so fast. So trying to determine, I guess, relevant content not just a flash with me drinking coffee in the morning, something like that. That is proving to be somewhat of a challenge. It's
Mm,
just like giving people something relevant.
mm.
And so I'm working on that.
Okay. Okay. Good. Well, if people want to purchase a copy of A Concoction of Lies, where can they go to buy it?
Anywhere they purchase books online. We have they call it a international distribution. So it can be found anywhere from Amazon to Apple to Target to Walmart, wherever they purchase their books online.
Excellent. Well, Patsy, I want to thank you very much for joining me today on the podcast, and I want to wish you luck with A Concoction of Lies and the work in progress. We will look forward to that. So fingers crossed, we'll see that soon. Congratulations on everything you've accomplished so far, and best of luck with the rest of your writing journey.
Thank you, Stacy. It has been a pleasure.
The Bookshop at the End of the Internet is a podcast dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Like any good bookshop, this podcast features a wide variety of books by the equally varied and interesting authors who felt compelled to write them. This podcast gives you a chance to meet these wonderful writers and discover your next must-read book. Listen to the authors describe their books and tell you their stories in their own words. My interviews feature books from all genres and authors from all walks of life, including those who are indie published as well as those published by small presses and large publishing houses. Looking for unique, not so easy to find books for yourself, a friend, or a book club? Tune into this podcast and find your newest favorite author or maybe a soon-to-be bestseller. This podcast, like all the best bookshops, is filled with all kinds of books and all kinds of authors. Tune in, browse around, find a new author, and discover a new favorite book. You never know what treasures you might find in the Bookshop at the End of the Internet.